Well, good afternoon. And again, I want to welcome Dr. Chris Lowthert. And Chris, thank you very much for another insightful and empowering opportunity to meet with you to discuss German New Medicine. Welcome.
It's great to be back.
Thank you. So today, where do you want to go with this series, this part?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I would love to field some questions that maybe been floating around in your mind since we started to unravel German New Medicine, and just hear where you're at over these. We've been doing it now over a month now, I guess, and just kind of get an idea of where you're at in comprehending the 5 biological laws, and possibly some questions that you may have that I'm sure others will have also. Yeah.
Very fine. Well, and you are correct. My mind has just been rich with questions and about this process called German New Medicine. And I thought that it was a very simple background concept. I have come to realize through our conversations over the last month that this is much, much bigger, much more brilliant, much more phenomenal than I could ever have dreamed. And I'm joining in thanking Dr. Hammer and thanking yourself and all the others who are bringing this forward, because especially today, especially when we are looking at a period in our lives in history where our freedoms are being taken away, German New Medicine offers us a personal freedom to care for our bodies. And that is probably the most striking aspect of German New Medicine, because what I'm learning through you and through your teaching of the 5 biological laws of German New Medicine is that our bodies understand how to deal with the assaults upon our bodies, and then take us through a very gentle healing process if we listen.
Yeah. And listening is key, and yeah, it's that intuitive voice that really becomes aligned with the 5 biological laws, and it becomes evident exactly what's the triggering event, and so the awareness of the significance of the unexpected shock is powerful medicine in itself, right? The awareness of the shock is a little easier to grasp when it's the big stuff that happens in our lives, right? So these big events, the unexpected loss of a job, death of a loved one, these big events are easy to become aware of as we work with German New Medicine, but then there's these subtle, unexpected events that oftentimes they go unnoticed. But there is that, as we talked, the preoccupying thoughts, the thinking, the compulsive thinking that happens, and it could be a low grade conflict shock. And it's just these little thoughts that keep popping up. And as you said, if we're not listening to those thoughts, it goes unheard. And then the time we stay in that conflict active phase begins to build, and it seems like the thoughts just continue to come back. And then finally we listen and we adjust, we make changes. And then as we make the changes and resolution comes about, often maybe unknowingly, right? Not intending to resolve it, but say life circumstances change, or just things change for you and the resolution comes about. And then all of a sudden, some type of physical symptom arises. And when we have the awareness of German New Medicine, those symptoms now all of a sudden really catch our attention. Because again, these subtle conflict shocks go unnoticed, but then when you have the symptom, you can't help but then go back and say, okay, what was it? And oftentimes it just emerges out of the subconscious. It emerges out of your psyche, and you recognize that it was that unexpected comment or that unexpected email that didn't seem to really phase you, but it did. Right? And so we can really hone our ability to attend to these significant biological experiences. And over time, our attention becomes very, very sharp. And that's the beauty of German New Medicine. As you continue to live your life with these 5 biological laws now in your, in your consciousness, every time we go through something unexpected, there's a sharpening of our attention. And it continues to build and build and build. And there's no authority, no agency that can take that experience away from you. Nothing. It's true freedom, really, as we said maybe a couple of talks ago. Dr. Hammer said that it's true freedom. German New Medicine is true freedom. And once you know it, nobody can take it away from you.
And how critical is that to,
Right.
I've often heard or reflected upon the statement that we know our bodies better than anyone else. And yet often we put the sole care of our bodies in the hands of someone else, rather than being the captain of our own boat, our own ship. And and this German New Medicine reminds us that we are in charge, and that we can then hire, we can then initiate the consultations of others who can aid us, but that we always are the ones who are at the helm, who must oversee what that incoming information does for us in our healing process. But it just underlines how to give up our authority over ourselves is to essentially abandon our own wisdom, abandon our own freedom. So German New Medicine is just, well, it's just one of the most powerful awarenesses that I have begun opening to in the last month. And I'm just thrilled. Just thrilled. Thank you. Yeah.
And it'll continue like I said, it'll continue to build with each experience, not only your own experiences, but also friends, loved ones that go through certain events in their lives. You holding that knowledge now have a tremendous effect on them, even if they don't know the 5 biological laws, maybe just a little bit, but just having that, holding that knowledge as you interact with other human beings, human animals, it's a whole different stance. You have a different role in the sense of supporting and helping.
Mhm.
And it's so, when somebody, a loved one that we're caring for, is going through something intense, like intense pain, discomfort, intense symptoms, the one who has that knowledge now actually helps them steady their own boat. It helps them stay steady and focused on, okay, what did they do, what are they supposed to be doing in that moment? And then allowing you to be that supportive agent in that process, and you holding that, not giving into the fear. Fear is natural. Fear comes about, obviously, but German New Medicine helps us eliminate that fear oftentimes when you know that this is a healing symptom, that you know that this is the epicrisis of the healing phase, right? And you know that, and then you also then know what the triggering event was preceding this whole uh, recovery phase, the healing phase. All that information, all that knowledge, again, helps steady the approach. It helps steady going through that healing phase that they're going through, and also yourself. You keep it steady, and that's powerful medicine for people. And so when somebody's going through extreme pain, if you're not afraid and you're holding steady and you're applying the knowledge, they feel that, they sense that, and they really surrender to the beauty of the healing,
Mhm.
because it's tremendous. It's beauty. It's beautiful how the body adjusts, how the body adapts, and how the body recovers following something that we had no idea was going to happen to us.
Mhm. Well,
Couldn't
it's,
pre-
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, I was going to say there was no prevention. You could have the best diet, take the best supplements, do all kinds of modalities, and you can still be hit with something unexpected. And if it's intense, the symptoms can be intense in the healing phase. But as we said before, a certain lifestyle, a healthy lifestyle, right, gives us the vitality to have a better, a steadying approach again. We have this vital force, this energy, because we have a healthy lifestyle, and it helps us through that process. But it doesn't. Fear is actually the number one complicating factor, not lack of diet, lack of nutrients, or lack of this or lack of that, or it's the fear of disease, the fear of symptoms that are the most complicating, that is the complicating factor. So,
Those all ring very, very clearly, and I know we're going to do one on the heart. So I want to save a number of my questions and experiences to that. But
sure.
the fear truly is what can steady us, right? moving the fear away, can
Right.
steady us right during the time of the most intense symptoms, and using breath and various other, various modalities like homeopathy or vitamins that, and herbs, and reflexology and acupuncture and acupressure and of course chiropractic work and all of these holistic modalities. But if we are afraid of the symptoms and we're full of fear, we can't take advantage of the support during the body's signaling during the acute phase, and then as it's going into the healing.
Sure. Yeah. It's it's all there. We have everything we need
Mhm.
to get through it. But if there's fear, it's going to impede that natural symbiotic relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
The fear will impede it and potentially even stop any type of healing from happening.
Right, right.
You
Yeah,
know? And so,
the fear creates the contraction and interferes with the blood flow to wherever that ailment is occurring. And letting go of that fear opens all of that up. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And we can also add stress to this too. So when we're in a stressful situation to begin with, and then something unexpected happens, that stressful situation is obviously going to enhance the conflict activity, right? So we're in a stressful, if we're in a stressful job or a stressful relationship, and then all of a sudden have an unexpected shock happen and we find ourselves in conflict activity where the sympathicatonia, right? The sympathetic nervous system is elevated, cold hands, lack of appetite, combined with that other stress, you can see how that enhances, that actually creates more sympathicatonia, right? Which means there's more physical changes taking place at the organ level that would be that would need to be healed, right?
Mhm.
And then the same applies when we're in the healing phase. If we're in that stressful environment and we go into a healing phase because the psyche resolved the conflict, now that stress can impede that natural healing from taking place. And so it's important that we manage our stress levels in our environment when we go through these situations. And at the same time, be careful that we're not directly associating the stress with our condition.
Could you
So,
explain that?
yeah. So it's very common that when German new medicine gets thrown in the conversation, particularly with alternative practitioners, oh, this is just another way of explaining how stress creates disease.
Right.
It's just, so this isn't nothing new. This is, well, that's incorrect. That's a big mistake they're making, knowingly or unknowingly. The stress is not what brings about disease in the body, but it does have a complicating factor when the unexpected shock occurs. The unexpected shock, the highly subjective unexpected shock, is what activates a significant biological program that is designed to give us an edge. It's designed to assist us through an unexpected distressful situation. And yet it can happen within a stressful environment, but it's not the stress that had activated it. It's a very, it's I would say subtle nuance, but once you make that shift and you understand the role of where stress comes into play in this, it's so relieving. Because I mean, how many times do you hear, oh, I got sick because I was so stressed out. I got sick because the stress of taking the final exams, or the stress of the relationship, and it's almost a victim mentality. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, life is stressful at times. Life can be stressful, But a lot of people put themselves in those situations anyway, so they're not taking full responsibility. Yeah, so it's this relationship we have with stress
Mhm.
is something that we can work on, right? As part of our lifestyle. But be careful, don't make the mistake and say that stress is the ultimate reason why we get sick.
Mhm.
We got to change the syntax. We got to use the words that Dr. Hammer has provided for us now that haven't been used before. Right? The special biological program was activated, and it was activated on in the psyche, brain, and body simultaneously. Right?
Mhm.
It happened simultaneously on all three levels, and it was activated due to an unexpected, shocking event. And as we said earlier, it could be the big events that we all can relate to, or oftentimes it's these subtle events that happen that just catch us off guard. And it's not until we develop the symptom of healing where we have the aha moment, like, oh, that email really did bother me.
Mhm.
I had an indigestible anger morsel. Well, what's that? Well, according to German new medicine, it's diarrhea. It manifests as diarrhea. So how often do we have bouts of diarrhea in our lives? And now you know it's related to an anger morsel that you could not digest. And it just could have been just subtle event that you might have just pushed off. And it's not until the next day you wake up and you have your bout of healing in the morning.
Mhm.
And that's, as I've said many times, this is the feedback loop that builds, that we come to develop and to really hone. And we see how the psyche responds. And sometimes we have a tendency to respond in a similar way to other events that happen, right? And I can only speak for myself. In that experience where you have something that recurs time and time again in response to different unexpected shocks, the moment that you really grok it, the moment that you really get it, that your psyche has let's say a vulnerability to respond to events with an indigestible anger. Or let's keep it real simple, like a frustration conflict or a stink conflict, right? So you tend to have runny nose or sinusitis, get all stuffed up occasionally because something stinks, something smells, right? And so it occurs over and over again throughout life. And then all of a sudden, through your own learning of GNM and experiencing the 5 biological laws, one day you have that stink conflict. It manifests in the healing, and that's when you come to this realization that you have the control now to really maybe stop that from happening, in the sense of activating that program again and again,
Mm.
because now you may take more responsibility for those things that you can control. But not saying that it can't happen again. But from my own experience with some chronic situation, chronic symptoms in the past, 15 years, it's part of the learning process, the self-reflective learning process. And you don't have to go through that stink conflict again, over and over again. You break away from the old associations that you may had you were carrying within your psyche, that were causing the sinusitis, right? The allergies, right? So you start breaking away from that, and you begin to really hone your awareness in on the true cause, the true nature of this symptom. And you change as an individual, you change, your perception begins to change. You start to recognize it maybe earlier on in the program. So it happens and you start to, okay, wait, you catch yourself now, right? You feel it happen, like you get that, I'm sure you've had that experience where the unexpected shock happens and it's like, ooh, you feel it. There's a flutter over the thymus region.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no coincidence that the psyche and the thymus and the butterfly are associated, right? Psyche, ancient Greek word, meaning butterfly. And so we feel that flutter here in the thymus region when an unexpected shock happens. And you have developed that awareness, that body awareness. It's amazing the feedback you get.
It was really interesting. Years ago, I still remember this moment because I was paying attention, but I couldn't quite fathom this. So I remember sitting at the table and feeling some stress, and it immediately transferred down into a sciatica pain, and it happened simultaneously. And I was sitting there, and I recognized it, and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, because it was a simultaneous experience. And so I don't know, maybe 23 years ago when that occurred, I've been paying attention, but it's only been in the last month that I have found German new medicine through you, and now gotten to see this bigger picture, and truly get to understand the connection of the body, the psyche, and the brain.
Yeah.
And the simultaneous experience, to put words to it that are much more developed than my rather coarse experience that I didn't know how to situate completely.
Sure, that's a beautiful example, and it explains, it describes a biological phenomenon where we get triggered by a track. Dr. Harmer calls them tracks, and tracks are really simply bits of information stored in the subconscious mind that's related to previous unexpected events. Okay. And so when that unexpected shock happens, we're in a very heightened state of awareness. All of our senses are heightened. And so if something happens and there's a particular song on the radio playing, that could be a track, okay? Or smell, or time of year, seasonal, right? These are examples of tracks that just touch on that program, and you don't go through the whole conflict active phase again, but you just re-experience the healing symptoms again, like sciatica, like a stuffy nose, runny nose, like a cough. So you don't go through the whole conflict experience again, but you just, it's beautiful how you're set on a track, and that takes you down a path that you once went down before, and now you're repeating it. And so the beauty of knowing this now is that once you identify the track and say, and connect it with something that occurred years ago, that's not happening now, presently for you, you can instantly neutralize that track through self-talk, through self-reflection. Like, I was in that situation 20 years ago, but right now, and let's just stay with sciatica, right now, I feel supported. I'm not feeling unsupported. That's the conflict shock of, that leads to sciatica. But back then I was feeling unsupported, but that's in the past. It's not happening now. The subconscious doesn't know that, though, right? We heard that, the subconscious can't distinguish between past and present or future, right? So, but anyways, when we once we recognize that we've encountered a track, and we can get a little emotional too. They're that flutter when we encounter a track. So another signal from the body that helps us hone in on the track. Once we recognize it and bring awareness to that track and the significance of that track, neutralized.
Right.
And this is how we work with so-called allergies or chronic recurring symptoms.
So it really does take being a sleuth about everything that is occurring within our body, our mind, that from past to now, and truly making a connection. I like to call the symptoms roadmap to what is going on, and to really honor that rather than looking at a symptom as something to wipe away. We must go into it. We must embrace it with tremendous curiosity. Again, that anthropologist from Venus or that anthropologist from Mars, and just really look with curiosity and delight and a reverence to the process.
Yeah. Yeah, one of my students, she often brings it up that she has to put her Snoopy hat on, using that probative faculty, looking into it, being that detective, looking at the evidence, looking at the facts, right? But yeah, being the sleuth, paying attention, listening, and it develops over time, but oftentimes, and particularly when we're interacting with other people, and I get this often, like, so I'm having this symptom, what's the German new medicine perspective on this, and they'll ask me. Well, oftentimes I'll just sit back and let them begin to talk, and oftentimes as they talk and let things out, there'll be key words that they use that give me the clues of what's going on. And oftentimes we just sit back and listen.
Yeah.
And they'll continue to develop the picture for you. And because if you know one of the three levels, if you know the symptom, let's just say, and you know the organ symptom, and then you know what the psyche component is. You know for beyond a doubt. You know that the diarrhea is a result of an indigestible anger, not a territorial anger. Territorial anger will develop as heartburn. So it's very precise.
Oh,
And
wow.
so it's very precise. And it's something that we as we learn, we may stumble over a little bit because we have a tendency early on in our learning of German medicine to I'm not getting the word here, but kind of mingle these the proper wording, like abandonment. I felt abandoned, or I felt angry. Well, if you have the diarrhea, I don't know why we're on this thing here with diarrhea, but
That's okay. It's a good one. It's a good
it's
one.
it's very common right now, by the way. If you
Oh,
didn't know.
yes.
But if you stick with, you know that it was an indigestible anger versus the emotion of anger. That's what we sometimes have, right? So what I'm saying is, when you have a particular symptom, you can go back and know exactly the emotional theme and stay with that, right? So, for example, if you're speaking to a friend and they have a skin rash going on, you know in your mind that they've experienced a separation conflict. Right? So as they begin to talk and share their story, they may begin to describe their experiences with emotions. Like, I was very angry at him. I felt abandoned by him. And so they're kind of dancing around it, right? But if you don't kind of nudge them a little bit in that direction of the separation, they may just psychologically make this whole story, and you'll never get to the root of it, or they'll never get to the root of it. So not only do we listen and that we allow them to speak, but we can also gently nudge them in a certain direction when you know the conflict theme. And so if they spend the first 30 minutes just talking about these emotions that we're having over a certain situation, and they're talking about all these other situations that's going on, and it's just not jiving with you, you're just not making sense, then you can just say, well, separation, did you feel like you lost contact with somebody, physical contact with something, and then all of a sudden their awareness goes boom straight to a particular event, not all this other stressful stuff that's going on, but a particular event where they no longer can touch somebody, or they're not feeling touched. They're like in the hands, right? Couldn't hold on to that person. I had an interesting case months ago where a woman came in and she had symptoms on her hand related to a separation conflict. And it was because she was unable to hold her mother's hand when her mother was dying in the nursing home.
Oh, wow.
She was unable to hold her hand.
Wow.
You see?
Powerful.
But there was in the story that she was sharing, there was all kinds of other things going on, obviously, the current events going on. But it was that specific feeling that she had that was kind of going unnoticed until we finally touched it.
Wow. I wanted to go into that a little bit more. We've all experienced an unexpected shock these last 2 years, at the beginning of essentially 2 years ago.
Sure.
And so subjectively, we are manifesting symptoms.
Imagine.
Yeah. And not understanding that shock, that unexpected shock that has hit us, not
Sure.
just once, but as the goalposts change repeatedly. It's like shock upon shock upon shock, depending upon how aware people are of what is unfolding out there in this narrative. And I think, as you've said, subsequent unexpected shocks can have deeper impacts as well. Can you talk to the multiple shocks? Because that's what I look back at this year, just from that external perspective, and talk to that for us, Chris.
Yeah, we'll dance now.
Okay.
We'll do a little dance here.
Okay.
Because this is powerful when you have this, what I'm going to share with you, this particular perception of what's unfolding right now. And we can start at the very beginning. And there was a certain narrative that was being put out that was supposedly causing or explaining the reason for certain symptoms, right? Sure. Okay. Was it really happening? Was it people really dropping in the streets? Mhm. From my perspective here in rural countryside, there was nobody dropping over dead, right? But it kept going, right? And so then things started to come down. Certain shocking restrictions happened. And then all of a sudden, some people started to develop symptoms, possibly, some people, not all people. It wasn't across the board, but in certain areas, there was apparently people getting sick. All right. So now we have a counter narrative running. And we know what that counter narrative entails. And it's about a particular procedure that's being done after this whole time, right? A year and a half, 2 years. Now we have a particular procedure that's happening. And many people on the other side of the fence are calling this out, talking about the counter narrative that's related to symptoms that are arising after this particular procedure. So how about we maybe look at this procedure, possibly, potentially, as a resolution? And if somebody was in a conflict phase for a year, and let's just say off and on, because that's how things go. Some people may have been in a conflict active for a year, but I haven't seen it. But say, for example, they were, and they had a procedure, and now finally their psyche is at ease. And then all of a sudden the symptoms take off. The myocarditis, you name whatever symptom, the seizures, the strokes, the Bell's palsy, possibly paralysis, all these different symptoms that are being discussed within this other narrative, these are coming about. But are they coming out? I don't know. That, again, in my own personal reality, I haven't seen it. Now, I've been told through this device, different outlets that it's happening. But personally, I haven't seen it. But I do see people, though, because of the duration of what we're going, how long we've been going through, I do see now people being more vulnerable to unexpected shocks and things that are developing in their life coming about, and then them developing certain symptoms. Are you following me here? I'm trying to.
Yes, I think I am. So
I'm trying to make a subtle point here, but I don't want to, and I hate not being able to talk about it, really. That
well, the
really,
censorship is
yeah,
so
it's real.
horrific that it makes us have to create another form of language to communicate things with words that we can't even use, and it's
Right.
rather ridiculous.
So
But
we were scared of rabies in the beginning, and now we're scared of the medical procedure that's coming about and that people are getting forced to take, right?
yes,
And could
yes,
these very well be the unexpected shocks that activate the biological programs in the people, and they develop the symptoms that follow, right? So for me, that polarization that it has occurred between the two narratives, the main narrative and then the counter narrative, the resistance, the people that are fighting it. That's a game that I don't play. I don't play in that game, never have, because as Dr. Hammer just elegantly and precisely explains to us, that these elements of these narratives don't apply. Don't apply. So if the little critter really did exist, it would have a symbiotic relationship with us, right? And at the same time, there the procedure is, yes, toxic, poison, but how does the body handle that? How does the body handle toxins and poisons? Well, this is a subject that we've been getting on occasionally, and it's something that we can't ignore and deny. But if someone is really hung up on not having the procedure, don't you think their psyche's vulnerable to an unexpected shock that would then manifest in certain types of symptoms, right? So do we prepare for it, or how do we prepare? How do we prepare for it? Do we stay in that fear mode, or do we just continue on with the things that we can control in our own lives and the choices that we can make in our own sphere of influence, and just let this thing play out, right? And deal with whatever comes down the pike when it and if it does come down the pike. But this whole thing that's happening right now, and it's really strange. A lot of people out there are talking about these coming months, and that people are going to be dropping over like crazy, right?
what's your sense of that? Yes, I know. I hear it so much that when I hear something so much, I really, my mind goes,
You're snooping. your Snoopy hat goes on, right? You're like,
Yes.
"Whoa, wait a minute, this doesn't,
It's too
something."
rampant. It's too rampant of a narrative, and I
Sure,
question it. Yeah.
sure. And I question it every day. And I oftentimes don't even pay attention to it, really, to be quite honest. I don't pay attention to the counter narrative. I don't pay attention to it because I sense the same ones that developed the other narrative developed the counter narrative. And it's the same ones who know and are aware of Dr. Hammer's work for the last 30 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They know the significance of the unexpected shock.
Yes, and they understand that everyone is vulnerable to it because we cannot control the unexpected shock. Number one of the biological laws that Dr. Hammer presents to us. So if we live a life deep in fear, if we live a life where we are not taking care of ourselves in eating well and exercising and spiritually developing ourselves and being in a loving loving way, then we're going to be more vulnerable.
Yeah, I
Yes.
mean,
We're going to be well, the how we heal
I'm
from it will
I'm
be
going I'm
different.
going to the individuals that are often part of this counter narrative, and they promote a healthy lifestyle. They promote, you know, eating well, right? They promote
That's
all this,
that's true. Mhm.
right? So is that enough?
Well, no, it's not enough to deter the impact of the unexpected shock.
Yeah. It's the awareness of the significance of that unexpected shock that is the true freedom, the true path to freedom.
Yes.
And until they acknowledge that in all its beauty, those in that counter narrative are they're still missing the boat. And it's the fifth biological law, Kathleen, that a lot of folks within the field of medicine, particularly alternative medicine, have a hard time with.
Tell us what
And
that one
they
is.
don't accept it. Don't accept it. They don't accept the fifth biological law, which is the quintessential that all so-called disease are significant biological programs designed to assist us in an unexpected, distressful situation. It's it. That's the fifth law. But for some reason, so many with brilliant minds, by the way, I mean, brilliant people talking out there right now that know about German new medicine, but don't acknowledge it. They push it off as some other mind body explanation, or push it off as some uh uh stress, as we said earlier, stress induced paradigm, explaining the manifestation. But really, you think about it, and again, it's the words that are powerful. We have special biological programs encoded in every cell of our body that are encoded with a specific intent to assist us during unexpected distress. I don't know about you, but I have a real hard time. Why can't people get that?
Well, it's like saying that there's an antidote that exists for every poison. And it's, if you're in the woods, I remember listening to an herbalist say years ago that where one toxin exists, if you look around, you'll find the antidote not too far away. And there's our body with the antidote to these unexpected shocks.
Right.
But what it is, it's truly believing that we really are these magnificent creatures.
Yeah, I think again, there's many brilliant minds that do believe that we have this magnificent capacity, but have a hard time accepting this challenge to the current medical model. The challenge that
Why do you
there
think that is?
they have a lot invested, potentially, right? They got a lot of investment into whatever they're doing, have a hard time letting that go, maybe have a hard time admitting that they're wrong. They potentially might have made a mistake, which is not a big, making mistakes is not, this is part of making mistakes are part of life, but not correcting them is the problem. So there's many talking heads out there, again, that know about German medicine and actually speak about it, at times with certain people, but yet continue to make the mistake of talking about disease as something that needs to be corrected. No, what needs to be corrected is themselves, because there's nothing flawed about nature. There's nothing flawed about the special biological program.
Mhm.
What needs to be corrected is their own belief in disease and belief that, there's all these different, like you were saying, different poisons out there that are creating this diseased culture that we're in.
Well, I can't help but think back, Antoine Beauchamp understood the terrain theory.
Mhm.
He truly understood that it wasn't a matter of something that maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but it was something that could be understood and not feared,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
dealt with. It was in the gut. But Louis Pasteur was quite well paid to
Well,
bring
right.
forth the germ
And there was
theory.
and many people at the time, as we know now, were completely against Pasteur's theories, right? And so,
Yes.
yeah, we had at the time a counter narrative to Pasteur narrative, and it was this terrain theory, which is being discussed very often now
Mhm,
as part of the counter narrative.
mhm.
But you see, they're missing. There's
Well, they're missing the point, but at least it's not as if there is something we have to chase, something that we have to be afraid of.
no,
Because the terrain is, to me, it's the body's function, and there's a clarity about the body's function, and to not
right,
be afraid of it. Whereas the other is about fear. So one is a fear-induced model, and the other is about embracing a natural system. And while it was far short of what German New Medicine talks about, it was not bringing forth the fear issue, which
right.
is such a criminal act from my perspective, because that throws people into a totally unempowered and stressful situation.
Yeah,
And quite the opposite with German New Medicine, while it is so empowering and so freeing.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah. I don't get it at times, Kathleen, as to what's holding them back from exploring, just as you are exploring the science of Dr. Hammer's work and learning the science of Dr. Hammer's work. And yes, we can acknowledge Beauchamp and his terrain theory. That's old news. It's old news.
Mhm. It is old, very old news, 1880s.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's a body of science that is reproducible in every single case, verifiable in every single case, using the brain and the brain scan to help in that verification process. Here's an explanation as to why people develop certain symptoms at certain times of their life, why colon cancer and not lung cancer, why Crohn's disease and not breast cancer, why here. How does one explain within terrain theory, how does one explain the reason why a woman develops breast cancer in her left breast and not her right breast? We're going to talk, can the folks in that camp explain why that happens?
Well, I don't think they can. I think the terrain theory is very simplistic,
Uh-huh.
and does not go into the emotional components of disease, and doesn't talk about the unexpected shock. It
Sure,
truly
sure.
is a very simplified version of, but basically saying that it's not something that attacks us. You know, the terrain theory, from my understanding, is just to say that we have a system within us that is
Symbiotic.
is thank you, symbiotic. Yes.
Okay, that's right. So again, they'd be stumped to answer the question as to why a woman develops breast cancer in her left breast and not her right breast. But
Mhm.
Dr. Hammer can explain it very simply. And it's, yes, there's the emotional component, but there's something else that we haven't discussed yet in our last month together. And it's called biological handedness. Our biological handedness, or biological laterality. And our biological handedness is determined within the first 21 days after the sperm and egg unite.
Oh,
As the cells are dividing, our biological handedness is determined. And our biological handedness can be discovered by the simple clap test. So when you clap your hands naturally, the hand that is on top will be your biological handedness.
wow. Well, uh, that's my left, and yours is your right.
Yeah, right. So there's a lot more right-handers than left-handers. I think it's I want to say 80-20 in nature. But anyways, so we have left-handers and right-handers. So let's just stick with our example of a woman that develops breast cancer in her left breast. Why does she develop in her left breast and not the right breast? Well, we can further explore the personal history, and we can, through questioning and answers, we can discover that there was a situation that involved her mother. Let's say child. Let's say child. Okay. So, and it was the emotional component. The emotional is a worry conflict. Dr. Hammer specifically calls it a nest worry conflict.
Mhm.
So this female is worried about a member of her nest. How beautiful. I mean, just
Yeah.
so it turns out that a nest worry conflict at the organ level is related to the breast gland tissue. This is the part of the breast that produces milk, the breast gland, versus the milk ducts of the breast, which is actually is controlled by a different area of the brain.
Mhm.
Therefore, it's a different conflict theme. And so a nest worry is related to the breast gland, and the biological purpose is in the conflict active phase. And so when that mother, that female, is worried about a member of her nest, let's say a child, instantly the brain sends the message to the breast gland tissue to begin to multiply, to increase the amount of breast gland tissue in order to produce more milk to nurture that child, to help that child, right? Because the breast is synonymous with nurturing. So that's the psyche, brain, organ level, but it doesn't explain why her left breast and not her right breast. Well, what Dr. Hammer found is that a woman who is right-handed, biologically speaking, would consider her left side her mother-child side,
Oh, wow.
versus the right side would be everybody else within the nest,
Mhm.
her partner, colleagues, friends, whatnot. And so this right-handed woman experiences a worry conflict in regards to her child. It's going to manifest in the left breast.
Wow.
Now, if that woman was left-handed, it would be opposite. Now would manifest in the right breast.
Mhm.
There's no other explanation that even comes close. They can't touch it. They can't get close to it.
Yeah.
And so this significance of laterality, biological handedness, explains why we develop symptoms on one side of the body and not the other, because it's going to be the relationship of the conflict to the other individual. Is very important.
Mhm.
And so again, to just finish up with this example, we can see how beautiful this is. So a right-handed mother will carry her child on her left hip, on her left side, to allow herself to have her dominant hand free.
Mhm.
Beautiful, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
absolutely beautiful. Observing how nature works.
Yeah.
And so this explains, to finish up with that example, explains why the left side and not the right side. And there's no other camp out there that can explain this.
Mhm.
They're not, and they can't explain it because of toxins. I mean, you think about it. How does the toxin theory explain this scenario? They can't. So you see how everything just kind of falls apart.
Mhm.
And depending on how those individuals are connected to that, it's going to determine how that goes for them, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And so, yeah, it will be quite interesting as time moves on and more people pop up talking about German medicine in their own unique way, in their own unique message, but sticking with the science, staying with the science. How much longer will it be ignored? They can't ignore it. And if somebody's going to be out there on the battlefield,
Mhm.
and I support that, I support the people that are out there that are putting up a fight against what's transpiring. The quicker they hop on board with German medicine, the better off they'll be in the
Mhm.
long run.
Mhm.
But that's not my problem.
Right. Well, you know, when there's a system that's as simple in essence, but has so much clarification, it begins to take on a level of complexity below the
Mm,
surface.
right.
And that was my own flaw, was when I first, you know, you described that early on when we first started talking today. I really thought I understood German New Medicine. And I didn't understand it at all. And as a holistic practitioner for many decades, I I did not, I just didn't understand or see the the system of the clarity of what Dr. Hammer was talking about.
Right.
So um, we'll just continue on, Chris, and go into more and more body systems and more examples and experiences until this new language becomes so familiar that we begin to see it. We begin to absolutely, completely um, embody it um, because it is a language
Sure.
that
It
that has to be learned in the psyche, you know, in the
takes
mind,
time.
in the
It
body.
it take it take time. It takes time. I think just to close up on this, it's just I suspect that it may get to a point in these coming months where it becomes so obvious as to why people are becoming sick.
Well,
It
and
will become
let us
more and more
continue.
obvious, you
Yeah.
know, they're losing their jobs, they're losing their homes, they're losing, this is what's triggering. And this explains why things manifest. And the more we can kind of not get caught up in that polarization, the better off we'll be. And the more supportive we will be to others
Mhm.
as we continue to move forward here.
Right.
So I just wanted to finish with that little point. It's just stay aware. And anybody that's listening and learning G&M right now and 5 biological laws, I have the confidence that it will become obvious as to what is triggering so-called sickness or so-called diseases.
Mhm. In other words, it's nothing new. It's the same thing that has always caused disease, and that is the shocking, unexpected shock upon
Yeah,
the psyche, the brain, and the body.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Chris, for an enlightening and educational experience on navigating this new terrain of German new medicine, it's a delight. I appreciate your time and your wealth of knowledge.
Well, it was fun being with you again, Kathleen, and I always enjoy what comes up in our conversations.
Our fireside chat without the fireside.
Pretty soon, though, we'll be getting the fires cranking here soon.
That's true. All right. Until our next time, thank you and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.